Welcome and thank you for joining the American Red Cross Northern California Coastal Region Speaker Series session. My name is Veronica Oberholzer, and I'm honored to be today's moderator. We are thrilled to have you join today's conversation and hope you will leave more informed and inspired about the work of the Red Cross. Today's session is being recorded and you are in listen-only mode so we can give our full attention to today's speakers. If you have any questions or comments throughout the session, feel free to submit them in the chat box where I will review and compile them. Our speakers will try to get to as many of them as possible during our question and answer session towards the end of the program. Remaining questions will be answered in a follow-up email along with the event recording and a survey. Today you will hear from 3 outstanding speakers who will share updates and stories on how the Red Cross works with our military service members and families. With that, I'm honored to introduce our first speaker, Michele Averill. Michele has been the Chief Executive Officer of the Central Coast Chapter of the American Red Cross since 2014. Serving Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito counties, she works with over 20 community leaders who serve on the board of directors and oversees 400 local volunteers who provide disaster support and services to more than 750,000 residents. We are lucky to have her as one of our fearless leaders carrying out the humanitarian mission of the Red Cross. Thank you and welcome, Michele.
Thank you, Veronica. It is a true honor to be here today, and I'm surrounded by these great leaders as well. So I'm honored to be here. I'm going to start the session with a quick overview of the Red Cross service to the Armed Forces, or what we abbreviate as SAF, to give you a broad sense of how our teams step up locally, nationally, and around the globe to provide critical relief for our military personnel and families. Taking it back to the Civil War, Clara Barton risked her life to bring supplies and support to soldiers on the battlefield. Through word of mouth of how her nursing skills had saved countless lives, she was introduced to the International Red Cross, and she quickly realized this type of organization could provide essential civilian disaster relief as well as wartime aid. And as a result, Clara founded the American Red Cross in 1881. In 1905, Congress actually revised the Federal Red Cross Charter to include aid to support our nation's military members, including active duty, National Guard and Reserve, as well as our veterans. Today, we are the number of military family calls when they need to reach their service person in an emergency. We are the smiling faces making the rounds at military hospitals, providing personal care items and encouraging words. And we are the respectful visitors paying tribute to veterans as they near the end of life's journey. Our employees, along with thousands of volunteers, help deliver services and offer critical assistance and resources at Red Cross offices across the country and in more than 100 military installations around the world, including Djibouti, Iraq, and Kuwait, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. As a result, more than 1 million military families have been served since 9/11. As people are familiar with Red Cross disaster responses, you can view our SAF programs through that same lens in the circular way of supporting our military families. And we do this by preparing for military service and life by assisting enlisted personnel and their families as they prepare for their military service, responding during difficult times and providing support to military members and family during times of crisis while serving, and with recovery by providing medical, family, and community support throughout their return home and return to civilian life. So what does this all really mean? We can think of this in 3 key components: providing emergency services, supporting military hospitals, VAs, and healthcare facilities, and building strong families and resilient communities. and how the Red Cross provides emergency services. When a significant family emergency occurs, such as a sudden death in the family or the news of a little one entering the world, the Red Cross is a gateway to a network of comprehensive assistance. The U.S. Department of Defense relies solely on the Red Cross to obtain verified reports of family situations for service members and their commanders, enabling them to make timely decisions about returning home. We have a great program called the Hero Care Network that can be accessed through the Hero Care app or a 24/7, 365 call center. Through this network, we can facilitate that connection all military families long for. In fact, the Red Cross is the only organization that the military allows to verify the emergency through a doctor, hospital, or the coroner. The verified information is then sent to the member's commanding officer, who has a final decision on whether the member will receive leave to come home. The Red Cross supports military hospitals and Veterans Affairs VA healthcare facilities. And since World War I, Red Cross volunteers and employees have worked with military and VA hospitals and clinics to provide rehabilitation therapy, morale building activities, and material assistance. We work with local community partners, and we support veterans and their families with vital services ranging from applying for veterans benefits, responding to emergency needs for food, clothing, and shelter, to referrals for counseling services such as financial, legal, jobs, mental health, and providing information on veterans cemeteries and burial benefits. And finally, how the Red Cross supports building strong families and resilient communities. The Red Cross works to strengthen families' capacity to cope with the unique demands of a military lifestyle. From preparedness briefings for the service member and their families, to post-deployment resources such as mind and body workshops to help readjust, we make sure from the time they are enlisted to being deployed to returning home, and then when their veteran service ends, they are well taken care of, regardless of which stage in their military career they're in. Summarizing these three key elements, one of the most powerful things that sets the Red Cross apart from other organizations is a continuum of care. From the day a service member enlists, throughout their time as active military, and beyond into being a veteran or retirement, Service to the Armed Forces provides one place for military members, veterans, and their families to turn to whenever assistance is needed. I hope this gives you a broad overview of how the American Red Cross serves military personnel and their families. I'm incredibly proud of this line of service that we provide and grateful to our partners and volunteers like you who enable this work to happen each and every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Michele, for that wonderful overview of our Red Cross services. I'd now like to introduce you to Dr. Michael Jordan, Vice President of Humanitarian Services for the Pacific Division of the American Red Cross since 2013. Prior to joining the Red Cross, Michael enjoyed a 27-year career as an executive in the Fortune 500 healthcare community. Michael is a decorated combat veteran who also served a successful career as an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, where he deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Desert Storm, and restored a platoon which suffered severe personnel loss in the Beirut bombing. His personal decorations include the Combat Action Ribbon with Gold Star Second Award. Michael is a proud Gold Star father of Second Lieutenant Travis Jordan, who died while serving on active duty in 2016. Michael holds a doctor's degree of education from Pepperdine University. He and his wife Lynn reside in Texas and raised two amazing sons, Connor and Travis. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Veronica. I really appreciate the very kind introduction. And I have to tell you, it's an honor for me to join this call with our chapter CEO, Michele Averill, and Secretary Leon Panetta. What a pleasure. Michele had asked me if I would share a little bit about my military background and my family, which is also integrated with the military, and what brought me to the Red Cross. So why don't we open up with a 3-minute video, which is really an interview that my family did several weeks ago with the Red Cross. Go ahead and roll that video, and then I'll come back and share 4 brief stories about my interactions with the Red Cross in different war zones. And I think you will be amazed at the reach of the American Red Cross. They were always where I was at when deployed. So Lynn and I were married in 1990, and we recently celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary.
We were married in Menlo Park, California. That's where we met.
Travis was born in Round Rock, Texas in 1993.
And Connor, he was born in Mesa, Arizona in June of 1996.
So I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps a month after my 18th birthday. My dad was a former Marine and flamethrower in the Korean War. And then Lynn, her father's also a Navy veteran from the Korean War.
Seeing all these different, people in my family's lineage serving has been a point of pride and a point of emotional strength.
And so we pass it on to our sons that you can't take these liberties and freedoms for granted. So they grew up knowing that.
My father's service was obviously pivotal in his life. I don't know a version of him where he's not trying to help other people or give back in some way.
Travis decided that he wanted to join the military, and with his skills, he joined the United States Air Force. He excelled in the ROTC program. He earned a full-time scholarship. He graduated from the program in 3 years.
In high school, he started a Best Buddies program for matching people with friends who don't have friends and they have disabilities. And then serving in the military, just felt true to his core. He wanted to help others and protect others.
He was the best hugger in the world. Just the biggest bear hug with his biggest smile. And he was exceptional.
We'll never forget that afternoon when we got the call from the chaplain and his colonel. They actually visited our house, and of course we went through the immediate shock and sorrow because it was painful. It's painful today.
Things were very, very tough, but we made a choice that we will be stronger as a family as a result.
We've actually become more open. We talk a lot more freely. We encourage each other.
But also be so comfortable saying, hey, I'm not feeling the best. Hey, I'm not doing okay. Because being able to talk about how you're feeling up here is one of the most important things.
And my hope and Lynn's hope is that we can normalize a conversation about depression and suicide and just recognize that just like physical health, it should be a part of our conversation. And when you're feeling it, that you're having a hard time or you're struggling, just share it and not be ashamed to share how you're feeling.
It's a blessing that we have our faith to rely on and each other. And we miss Travis terribly.
Thanks, Veronica. So I think what that shows is that the military life is filled with both many moments of pride and pain. And I think my son and wife said it well when, in these types of circumstances, first of all, it's not necessarily too unique in the military world to have both a lot of pride in the work that we do and the pain. But we learned that these types of circumstances could either destroy us, they could define us, or they could strengthen us. And we made a decision as a family that we best honor our son's life by letting it strengthen us, because that's what he would want. And so I just wanted to share that. Thank you for sharing that video. And so I have 4 brief stories I'd like to share with you about how the Red Cross has touched our family. And I'll conclude with my 4th story about Travis, the wonderful things that we've done with the Red Cross to help move the story of mental health forward. So when I go back to my early days in the Marine Corps, in 1983, you may all recall the Beirut bombing. And I was a brand new second lieutenant, 21 years old, and it was not in the Beirut blast. I was slated to travel there with my new boss, Major John McCruglow, and I was working on my turnover with Lieutenant Joe Bocci. My new boss flew over just before I did, and the terrorist struck, and he was killed in the blast along with Lieutenant Bocci and most of the 109-man platoon that I would take over and restore. And so my experience was, basically my assignment was to restore this platoon, and I spent my time going to the Camp Lejeune Naval Hospital and also working in the barracks to help rebuild the team. But it was my interaction with the Service to the Armed Forces volunteers that really helped me, because at 21 years old, I wasn't equipped to deal with grieving parents, and also on how to help these young Marines manage their grief journey, having been severely wounded with these crush blasts in the Beirut bombing. And so it was the Red Cross who showed up, took me under their arm, and helped me navigate that. I remember putting pictures up in the barracks to make it more welcoming for parents who then had become Gold Star parents and were visiting the barracks. And then also how to communicate, write handwritten notes, and visit the Marines recovering in the hospital. So I tucked that experience and memory away. And in fact, in the photos here, you'll see I had a chance to meet and have a photo with the battalion commander, who was also injured severely in the blast, and that's his young daughter next to him. But I think through it all, I realized how much the Red Cross does help the troops. So fast forward to Operation Desert Storm. I had left active duty, started pursuing my corporate career when Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm kicked off. And you probably recall when General Colin Powell was on the news and General Schwarzkopf. But I raised my hand and said I want to return to the active forces and serve and do my part. So I was assigned to an engineer battalion in the front lines of Kuwait, the Kuwaiti border. And our mission was to liberate the people of Kuwait from the Iraqis. And so I recall we were there for a couple of months, dug in on the border during the air war, which was intense. And it was probably 40 degrees. It was muddy, raining, and morale was, was suffering. And I think the intensity of knowing or believing that we would be attacked with nerve agent and anthrax, and we were taking all the medication to help prepare for that. I remember our CO came up to the border and said, hey, look, the drone attack is imminent. Your assignment's to breach the minefield in southern Kuwait, and you get a chance to call home if you want to jump in your Humvees and drive about 10 kilometers behind the border into Kuwait in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, where they have a big satellite just set up in a tent. So me and some of the Marines said, let's do it. So we drove down there, and I remember standing in line for 4 hours for my 15-minute phone call. And I can tell you, because of the intensity for all of us, we thought that it may be our last call home. And so we wanted to make the best of it. Then getting back to the front line, I remember going to my CEO and saying, who made that possible? I said, that was incredibly meaningful. And I was a newlywed, I'd been married 6 months. And he said, well, the Red Cross had collaborated with AT&T and the military and placed that dish out there so you could communicate home. So once again, I tucked away this experience with the Red Cross that everywhere I am in some of these forward deployed areas. And I also can't forget Corporal John Waldron, who was one of our Marines who did get killed in action on 26 February. And during the ground attack from our battalion. And I never forget how our battalion commander stopped right after operation ceased in southern Kuwait in the desert. We had a memorial service for John. And I share that because what I learned with the Red Cross is that they really are equipped to help you with the mental health counseling and how to process this type of grief and tragedy. And so fast forward to Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I once again returned to the reserve component back in the U.S. and was working on my, my corporate career. And after 9/11, I wanted to serve again. And in 2004, 2005, I got the opportunity to go back in and redeploy, this time with a civil affairs group to Ramadi, Iraq. And the mission was to go there and, given the humanitarian crisis unfolding in the midst of the insurgency, to rebuild the community of Ramadi in the Anbar province. And a pretty tall order to introduce democracy, hold elections, build a provincial council, elect a governor, and all while fighting the insurgency. But that was the context. And the reality was, my team and I lived outside the wire 6 days a week in downtown Ramadi. We tried to get some of the Iraqis to come back to work. We held some elections, but on a routine basis, we were rocketed, mortared, fired upon, and it was intense. I remember the first trip down, my boss, who was to be the director of the operations center, we were hit in our convoy with IED, and I had to do first aid and medevac him out. He was severely wounded, and had to go back to the States. So then I assumed command as a director of the civil military operations in Ramadi. And I'll never forget how the Red Cross, even though they couldn't be in Ramadi because it was a pretty dangerous area, they were in Baghdad, they were able to keep me informed on two of my Marines, Kevin Main and Bruce Leslie, and how they were recovering. Bruce came back to our unit, and Kevin had to recover back in the States. So I was grateful for that information that somehow they managed to provide. And then we had another Marine who, back home, his wife became gravely ill with cancer, and he got the call through the Red Cross Emergency Communication Center saying, you know what, we validated that this Marine's wife is struggling, and we'd like to bring her husband home. And so, because the Red Cross is the only congressionally chartered organization that can do this and verify it, we were able to send him home. The Red Cross, through generous donor dollars, paid for the airline tickets and got him home. And so, I'm out there in this war zone thinking, boy, the Red Cross is, again, everywhere I am. And then the final thing that really stuck out to me in my small team is when you're living outside the wire 6 days a week and taking 2 canteen showers in the field, getting those care packages from volunteers meant so much. I mean, between my lovely wife sending me care packages and the Red Cross we were taking care of, and the little snack packs mean a lot when you get one hot meal a week. We used to get it at the edge of Euphrates River. We had a little camp set up called Camp Blue Diamond where we could get hot chow 1 day a week and a hot shower 1 day a week. So having those toiletries was a big deal. The other part, though, that was even probably more important was the handwritten notes from volunteers that we received saying how much they cared about the work we were doing and asking us, about the operation, things that we could share. But here we got people that really don't even know us. We're all Americans, but getting that letter in that type of intense environment just meant the world to us. And then, so after that deployment, we had a chance to then retrograde, military term, out of Ramadi. We flew helicopters back to Baghdad, and then we took aircraft back into Kuwait, and we had a week of time to decompress and have a bit of respite in Kuwait, which we desperately needed. And the Red Cross, which I didn't know until I got there, had at Camp Arapjan in Kuwait, had a site set up. And my team and I were able to go in there and really get that respite we needed. And they provided, the mental health care to help you understand psychological injuries. They were able to help us communicate home. And although at this time, there seemed to be, communications had improved with cell phones and that sort of thing, we didn't have that. And so being able to sit there in the Red Cross site and get on the computer and also call home on the satellite phones was incredibly meaningful. And the warmth. I forget a lot of things in life, but I never forget how I was treated. And I can tell you the treatment I received from the staff there and the volunteers in all these different experiences was just amazing. And I remember thinking, if I get an opportunity at some point, I want to give back. And so I left that deployment in 2005, went back to my corporate job, and years later in 2013, I got the opportunity to join the Red Cross in the role I'm in now. And I've never looked back. and it's just been a wonderful journey. So my older son Travis, who you saw in the earlier video, had also joined the military, wanted to follow in my footsteps and Grandpa's footsteps, and became a lieutenant in the Air Force, and tragically struggling with mental health issues, took his life, and which rocked our world. And you know, I think about how the Red Cross and my coworkers came, first of all, to be there for our own comfort in trying to recover from losing Travis, but then you know, seeing how mental health had become front and center in the community for veterans and military alike. And you've heard the term 22 military folks in the armed forces die by suicide every day. Well, we became a part of that statistic, and so then it's no longer a statistic, it's incredibly real. And so the Red Cross said, since we know that there's about 40,000 troops a year that get pumped through Kuwait into the theater of operation in the Middle East, let's make sure we put mental health front and center in our site in Camp Arafjan. And so Kobe Langley, who is the senior vice president and also a fellow Iraqi war veteran, we flew out there together, and we did a joint fundraiser and refurbished the site since it had been open since 2003 in the first March on Baghdad, and then opened up the what's called the Travis Jordan Healing Arts Center. And so it's incredibly moving. My son and I went out, my other son Connor went out and participated in the opening, which you see in the photos there. My wife Lynn, I think emotionally it was too early for her to make that trip since it was the following year. But I can't tell you how meaningful it is. And so ironically, 2 days ago, I got contacted by a captain in the Air Force who happened to be on Travis's Air Force shooting team. And he was in Kuwait. He went in and ran right into the Healing Arts Center and ran into Travis's picture. And these guys have been best buddies when they became shooters in the Air Force pistol team. And he texted us home and said, "Oh, this place is so moving, and I just want to let you, Mike, and Lynn know that I'm out here." And so I can't tell you how meaningful that is, but I think we honored Travis's memory, life, and service by taking what we've learned from this to help others, and so that's why we've made this commitment.
Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your military background and military family for us. You're getting a lot of appreciation in the chat too. I know what you're saying really resonated, and we're so grateful for your service to our country and to the Red Cross mission. We have received a few questions about the role that the Red Cross is playing in the Afghan refugee mission, and so I'm hoping that you'd be able to comment on recent events there.
Yeah, certainly. A great question. And so again, stepping back over the last 3 decades, which I covered pretty rapid fire with 4 stories, you can see how the Red Cross is everywhere, deeply involved in supporting our armed forces around the globe. And I can tell you with Afghanistan, because of our unique footprint around the Middle East and Europe, we were involved in the response in this most recent Afghan refugee evacuation. And we provided the things that we do best. We provided shelter and supplies, food and support for the thousands of refugees that had to leave the country. And the Red Cross, we have a great relationship with the Department of the VA and also with the Department of Defense. And so we were in close collaboration with responding in a fashion that would support the mission on this evacuation. And so when I think about the Veterans Affairs and our relationship, I think where that was meaningful is with our current veterans in active duty who've all participated in the Afghanistan war for the last 20 years. And so not only were we trying to work and support the refugees, civilians that needed to get out, but we also want to make sure we were tuned in and taking care of all our past and present armed forces personnel who participated in that war and in the evacuation, because we know it puts a tremendous amount of stress and affects the mental health. And it's really, veterans struggling to cope with what was happening. And just to give you an example, we had deployed nearly 800 veterans, either remotely or physically around the country to various bases to help support the Afghan evacuees and provide that support. So that was, and so even though the operation now has come to a conclusion with our role in not just responding during the actual evacuation or helping respond here in the United States, supporting the different bases, providing a number of items that they would need for their families, financial assistance, clothing, and support, but now reconnection. Whenever there's a war across the globe, we have that capability to help reconnect families, and so we've introduce that to the refugee population to help them connect with their family members that they're separated. And so, Veronica, I'll make just one final comment about my point of view as a military person to other military folks about the this whole Afghan experience. I think no matter what you really think or believe about what we did or didn't do the last 20 years, one thing that I've learned over my last 3 decades of being involved with these operations is that once you plant the seeds of liberty and personal freedom, there's no going back. And I believe that forms of government come and go, but the sacrifices that our men and women made, those my heroes who were killed in action, and those were wounded in action, and those that have returned have made a difference. And from that, I consider it meaningful. So with that, let me turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing those details and reflections about our response to the Afghan crisis. I want to remind our audience to submit any questions you may have for any of our speakers in the Q&A feature. We will get through as many as we can towards the end of the program. Now it is my honor to introduce you to our next speaker, Secretary Leon Panetta. A Monterey native, Secretary Panetta has a distinguished and tenured background in public service. Starting back in 1964, he was a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, where he received the Army Commendation Medal and was honorably discharged as a first lieutenant in 1966. He then held multiple public office positions, including the United States Secretary of Defense, Director of the CIA under President Barack Obama, White House Chief of Staff under President Bill Clinton, Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and member of the U.S. House of Representatives for more than 16 years. He co-founded the Panetta Institute for Public Policy based at CSU Monterey Bay with his wife Sylvia in 1997, and of 2013, he serves as the chairman of the Institute. Secretary Panetta, we are thrilled to have you join us today. We would love to hear a bit more about your background and motivation for getting into public service, and then Michele will continue the conversation with you.
Well, thank you very much, Veronica, for that kind introduction, and thanks to all of you that are participating in this program. Thank you for your generosity and for supporting the American Red Cross in the work that they do. It's also an honor for me to be here with Michael and with Michele and with you, Veronica, to be able to try to give all of you out there just a sense of how important the American Red Cross is, particularly to our armed forces. I mean, the reality is that when we deploy our men and women in uniform abroad and put them in some very difficult locations under very difficult circumstances, and where they're willing to put their lives on the line in order to protect our country, the ability to provide human support to them in these very difficult positions is incredibly important. Important to them personally, but also important to the mission that they serve. And that's what the Red Cross does. That's exactly what the Red Cross does. 1,400 times a day, the Red Cross is helping military families and veterans and members 1,400 times a day. And they're doing it across the world. installations that are located across the world that basically provide that support system that I'm talking about. Emergency services, helping people when they're facing crisis in the military, helping them to make a phone call back to their family, helping them to make a flight home when there's an emergency. And yes, even giving them a cup of coffee, sometimes on a very cold night. That's the kind of human support that is critical. And in the end, the American Red Cross is about public service. Public service. And the goal of public service is to try to help people have a better life. I believe that. And in many ways, I think that goes to the American dream. And I've had the honor to live that American dream. I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My parents came here like millions of others. And I used to ask my father, why did you come all of that distance to come to this country? And I never forgot my father's response, which was that my mother and he believed they could give their children a better life in this country. And I believe that to be the American dream. And I've had the opportunity to be able to live that dream in many ways. I'm often asked, what is it that inspired me to public service? And there are basically three things. Number one, my parents, who said it was important to give back to this country that gave them the opportunity to be able to succeed here and enjoy the freedoms and the rights and the opportunities that are part of America. Secondly, it was service in the Army. Michael, talking about his experiences in the military, it tells you a lot about what service to country is in the military. When I was in the Army for 2 years, this was during the draft period, and young men from across the country, at that time it was men from across the country, were part of our military. And to see that great diversity and yet have them all come together to be able to work together and fight together for a common mission taught me a lot about duty to country. And lastly, there was a young president at the time who asked, don't ask what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I never forgot those words. And the combination of all of that led me to a life of public service. And now I sit here at the Panetta Institute on the campus of CSU Monterey Bay, and the goal of our institute is to basically inspire young generations, our young people, to lives of public service. Why? Because I think our democracy depends on everyone serving our democracy and giving back to our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Panetta. I'm just so honored to be here with you today, and having you as a part of our community for me is so huge. Your family, the inspiration, and I remember, when we had the 1989 earthquake and seeing you out, in the forefront of the recovery effort there. And I just wanted to see if we could kind of change gears a little bit and talk about what you saw, in the Red Cross's effort and response to the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake.
Well, Michele, you were there. A lot of friends that we have were part of this community at the time it was impacted. I'll never forget when that earthquake hit. As most of you will remember, it was almost a 9-point, I think, on the Richter scale, and it hit very close to Santa Cruz. That day I was in Washington I was a congressman and working in Washington. And my wife and son actually went to the World Series game, which was in San Francisco, between, I think, San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's. And they were there at the stadium when that earthquake hit. And I remember I was watching the game from back east, saw what happened. The television went blank. And then it came back on, and you could see the devastation that occurred in San Francisco with the Bay Bridge parts of it going down. And then I began to get reports from my district that a tremendous amount of damage had been done in my community on the Central Coast. And I also was able ultimately to try to get a hold of my wife, who was driving back, not having seen that World Series game, which was canceled, but driving in the dark all the way back to Carmel Valley, our home. When I found out the devastation that had taken place in downtown Santa Cruz, in downtown Watsonville, in downtown Hollister, all communities in my district, I remember calling the White House to seeing if I could try to get a plane to get back to the district. And President Bush at the time generously allowed myself and other members of the delegation to be able to fly back as quickly as we could. And I remember visiting those communities and seeing the devastation. The president actually came out and looked at it as well. But we had downtown areas devastated. We had homes that were impacted. We had victims who were really on the streets. Their homes were totally damaged. We had to respond. And I have to tell you that the American Red Cross was critical to the response effort to try to help people. Because when a disaster hits, people are in shock. They're not sure what's happened. They're not sure where their lives are going to go. And to be able to have the Red Cross provide a support system, be able to put their arms around these victims, give them help, give them food, give them support. We had to locate a number of families, for example, in the Watsonville area, in trailers, and the Red Cross was right there trying to help these families in those trailers. We used to have a task force meet as congressman. I thought it was really critical to have a task force together of all the agencies responsible for the disaster, and the Red Cross was right there because sometimes, the bureaucracies don't respond as quickly as they should to these crises. But the Red Cross is on the ground. They're talking with people, they're helping people, they're reaching out. And I just have to tell you, we've come a long way. We recovered a great deal as a result of that earthquake. But a lot of that could not have happened without the support, without the help that the local Red Cross provided.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So since our inception, the Red Cross has worked tirelessly to ensure military members and their families are cared for and have often been a partner to the government in these efforts. Can you tell us about why you value your partnership with the American Red Cross?
Well, as we know, the Red Cross has been doing its job for over 150 years, going back to Clara Barton. And in the 20th century, it played a huge role in terms of supporting our military in World War I, World War II. I was in the military during the Vietnam era, and as I said, I was located here again at what was at that time the Fort Ord Military Reservation, which was training our young men for duty. And I have to tell you that the Red Cross at that time was extremely helpful because, a lot of these kids were trying to figure out why they were being drafted, why they were being asked to serve. We were dealing with emotional problems. We were dealing with problems involving their families. And I can't tell you how many times we called the Red Cross to provide help. It's that human contact, the ability to kind of reach out to these young soldiers and try to give them a sense that they're not alone, and that they have the support of the Red Cross and of the community in what they're trying to do. And so that was incredibly important. When I was in Congress, as a congressman, as I told you, I dealt with the Red Cross on disasters. It wasn't just the earthquake, it was floods as well that we had to deal with in terms of disasters. When I was chief of staff to the president, we were dealing with national disasters, and almost immediately, wherever we would go on a national disaster, whether it was a flood or a hurricane or a tornado, the Red Cross was there. And I can't tell you how important they were to trying to immediately respond to the needs of people in a disaster. And as CIA director and as Secretary of Defense, I had the responsibility, obviously, as Secretary of Defense, to deploy our forces in harm's way. And as director of the CIA, I had a lot of CIA people right in the middle of combat, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan. And in both of those war zones, the Red Cross was there. And when we needed help, when somebody needed help because they wanted to contact their family, or they needed personal attention, or there was an emergency of some kind, the Red Cross was there to help. And I saw that happen in Iraq, and I saw that happen in Afghanistan. And I think it's really important to try to give people a sense that these are people who, in some ways, are putting their lives on the line as well. I talk about our men and women in uniform doing that. I have to tell you, in the places I've seen the Red Cross, they too are putting their lives on the line. And thank God for that, because that combination of both our military, supported by the Red Cross, is what represents the security for the United States of America. The Red Cross plays an important role of supporting our armed forces, and we could not do that job in the armed forces without the help of the Red Cross. So there's a real partnership there that's critical, not just to our ability to help our fellow human beings, it's critical to our national security.
Thank you so much. I have one more question for you. And would you like to share a little bit about your son, Congressman Jimmy Panetta, and his experience with the Red Cross while he was deployed in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I told you how important the Red Cross is in these combat areas, and that was true in Afghanistan, as Michael pointed out. Jimmy was in the Naval Reserve as an intelligence officer, and got activated and was sent to Afghanistan. I too was an intelligence officer, and in those days, you did intelligence. In today's world, an intelligence officer can be assigned, in the Navy, by the way, can be assigned to a special forces unit to be able to go after terrorists. And that's what Jimmy was assigned. He was assigned to, as an intelligence officer, naval intelligence officer, was working with special forces out of Bagram Air Base. And going after terrorist targets. Jimmy, like other members of the military, he had left his wife and 2 kids, Syria and Gia, who were young children at the time, back here in the States. And Sylvia and I, my wife and I, tried to give them as much support as we could. But Jimmy wanted to stay in contact with his family. And as Michael pointed out, it's not easy to get phone communications back home. But the Red Cross, thank God, working with telephone services, and they actually put up telephone booths. I've seen them, not just at Bagram, I've seen them in Kabul, and I've seen them elsewhere in Afghanistan. There are people lined up to be able to use these telephone services to call their families. And Jimmy, thank God, was able to do that, on a regular basis, to call home and to talk to his wife, Carrie, and to the kids, and to talk to Sylvia and I. And I can't tell you what a tremendous comfort that was to be able to hear his voice and know that he was okay. In addition to that, Jimmy knew that there were others that needed to be able to fly home in emergency situations. And it was the Red Cross that helped get those young soldiers back home by providing airfare so they could get back for an emergency. So I think Jimmy would be the first to say that the Red Cross was absolutely essential to the ability of our men and women in uniform to be able to perform their role to protect our security. Thank God the Red Cross was there and providing those vital services.
Thank you so much. And Veronica, back over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Panetta, and to all of our speakers for providing such valuable information. We're getting a lot of appreciation for you from the audience, and we've had a lot of great questions come in that we'll jump right into. This first question is for Michael. As a former service member yourself, what part of the Red Cross service to the armed forces are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that these Red Crossers and their willingness to be in all these combat zones around the globe. As Secretary Panetta said, everywhere we go, they're there. They're in Afghanistan. They're in Iraq. I was at the headquarters for the Red Cross in Washington, D.C., and I stepped outside to catch some fresh air, and I found the monument of the Red Crosses who were killed in the Vietnam conflict, because they're right there. There's no really front line, and it really wasn't in Vietnam, and there's no front line now in these wars that we fight on the global war on terrorism. And so I guess I'm most grateful. And so it helps when, when I reflect on a personal story, and this was my last deployment to Iraq. I remember the day that two Marines providing us security to do the election on 20 April 2005, Kelly Cannon and Marty Mortensen were killed in action. And I remember crying that night. It hit us all so hard. And then 30 days later, Major Ricardo Crocker, who was a mentor of mine in training, was killed in action. And so when we retrograded back to Camp Arafjan to decompress for a week, when we talk about decompressing, it's serious, but you're talking to Red Crossers who are there. So they understand it. They understand the alerts. They've heard the bomb blasts in the distance. And so you feel like you have somebody that really understands, and that you can, they can help you try to explore this path to grieving and dealing with those sorts of tragedies. So I guess I'm most proud of the fact that the willingness of the Red Cross is to be right where the action is.
Thank you, Michael. Our Red Crossers are truly inspiring. Michele, this next question is for you. On a regional level, can you share how we work with local partners to serve military and veteran groups such as those at Travis Air Force Base, and how we get connected with the people at the military bases so they know how to reach us when they need our services?
That's a great question. Our local team provides Red Cross briefings for every military member who passes through the San Jose Military Entrance Processing Station, so that each military member is aware of Red Cross services. At the briefings, enlistees are encouraged to fill in a family contact card, and then this card is then provided to our local SAF caseworkers. They then telephone the family and let them know how the Red Cross can support them while their family member is deployed and beyond. We also work closely with Travis Air Force Base Military Command to provide information on Red Cross services and discuss opportunities for collaboration. We have an office on the base, and it is staffed by local team members who are also able to answer questions. And we also connect locally with veterans groups, and we have strong relationships with our Palo Alto VA networks and San Francisco VA networks. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. With just a few minutes remaining, I'd love to address one more question to Secretary Panetta. You've had such an incredible career serving in many impactful positions. What do you consider to be your greatest achievement throughout your career, and why?
Well, you know, I've had a great ride in public service for almost 50 years of public life. And I've really had the honor to be in a number of key positions. And in every one, I've been proud to be able to serve this country. I began early on as a director of the Office for Civil Rights, working on trying to promote civil rights among children, particularly in the South, and I was very proud of that work. As a congressman, very proud of the fact that I was able to establish the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and be able to protect our coastline. And here at Fort Ord, when Fort Ord was closed, able to locate a campus of the CSU system where I'm located now. And I'll mention one other thing, as OMB director and chief of staff, we were able to balance the federal budget and actually had a surplus. And at a time when I think our national debt is now about $28 trillion, I considered that pretty good. And also, you know, a great work at both the CIA and the Secretary of Defense during a critical time. As Secretary of Defense, having a chance to open up service opportunities to a lot of people was a great privilege. But I have to tell you, the one mission that probably is at the top of it is, as CIA director, I was involved in the mission that went after bin Laden. And it was an incredible experience to be able to work with the intelligence officers that ultimately were able to locate him in a compound in the middle of Pakistan. And more importantly, then work with special forces, the SEALs at that time, 2 teams of SEALs that went in by helicopter 150 miles at night into Pakistan to basically rappel down and get bin Laden. It was a remarkable mission. And more importantly, it sent a message to the world that nobody attacks the United States and gets away with it. So I'd have to say that that's pretty close to the top of my list.
Wow, thank you so much for all your wonderful service. I'd like to invite Michele to conclude today's session with a few closing remarks. Michele, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Veronica. I don't want today to end. This is truly one of those times in your career and in your life where you just feel truly honored and humbled to be surrounded by these 2 great people and talking about mission and their lives and what they have done. It's incredible. So thank you for your service, for all you've done for our community, for our country, and everything. I can't say how honored I am to be here today. But I also wanted to thank those who are on this call who have served or are part of a military family, or if you're a donor or volunteer who supports the work of Service League Armed Forces, or if you'd like to become involved with Service League Armed Forces work, please, reach out. We can get you connected. We would love, to bring on more team members. And it doesn't matter what your background is. We can train you just to be a part of this family. It's an incredible group of people. But I want to thank you for spending your day with us. I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. We're going to have another speaker series in spring of 2022. And so please keep an eye out. The invitation will be coming out shortly. But thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you again, Secretary Panetta. Thank you, Michael. Pooja, thank you for organizing today. This was just an incredible opportunity, and as I said, I'm truly honored to be a part of it. So thank you.
A follow-up email with a recording for this session, along with a quick survey to gather your input, will be sent out later this week. Thank you once again to our amazing speakers for a wonderful discussion, and to everyone who joined us today. This now concludes today's session. Enjoy the rest of your day.